third way is often like the most difficult path to forge, because then you have to explain why neither option is acceptable instead of just like weighing two options.
Yes, of course, and that is why the propaganda system is so potent, because people like indoctrinated from a young age to believe all these things about one side's this, the other side's that. That's democracy. And when you sort of say no, they're the same team, but they present it as a kind of pluralistic battle to make you think that you live in a democracy, and people are like, oh, okay, well. And then the other thing is, people don't like to be told that they've been lied to for many years, and journalists don't like to be told that they're part of a propaganda system either. So they always say, I can write what I want, and then I would say, well, you can write what you want because they like what you write. That's the thing. And if you write something different, then you'll know about it. And it is interesting how it works, because it's not a Soviet system where like you get put in prison or for writing a certain thing or publishing a certain newspaper. We do have a freedom here, which is different. And the media is free. Your editor's not saying don't write that. But it operates in a much more insidious way. It's so interesting. Like and it's a culture. So you go into somewhere like the FT, and like no one's told you what's right. But if you're reading something every day, and everyone around you is saying a certain thing, and certain ideas are just never ever aired, over time you just stop thinking them as well, and you become inured to the whole system, and that's what happens to everyone. The reason never happened to me was I had quite strong ideas, or I didn't understand it in the way I understood it after, or got to understand it while I was there, but I had strong ideas about how the world worked, or how I thought it worked, and I was able to resist becoming part of the kind of homogenous way of thinking. But generally that's very rare, and I don't think many people, and as I say, I think this is a red line. Like, it's interesting that the corporate stuff, like Silent Coup, that is, you can talk about that, actually. There is a space in the mainstream, not a big one, but a space to talk about corporations having too much power and stuff. US empire is like a huge red line. Like, there's no one who can really, like, even in the mainstream, there's hardly any anti-imperialist, when I'm talking, like, writers, like, even people like, say, for example, George Monbiot or Owen Jones or Aditya Chakraborty, who do good stuff on domestic issues. You'd never see them take on, maybe write a column about the CIA's covert war in Syria, which was huge, Operation Timber Sycamore, or anything. So you've got this whole swathe of the world that just isn't critiqued even by left mainstream figures. So I think that for me, like the US empire, despite being the most powerful empire in history of the world, despite being the governing dynamic of international affairs, is unspeakable. You can't speak about it. It's unsayable, and we need to change that. I don't know how you do that, because we're up against a huge infrastructure of propaganda. It's not just the media. It's like whole institutes and think tanks, like NATO. If you look at the think tanks here, like the foreign policy ones, like Chatham House or RUSI, or the ones in the US, like Atlantic Council, they're funded. They've got all the money. They've got funded by NATO foreign ministries. They're funded by Lockheed Martin, by all these, and they create the discourse. So, and the discourse, that's why it's such a red line. Because no one can speak about it.
Yeah, it's like if Lockheed Martin come in, they say, right, okay, we want to conduct a study on how our bombs are affecting the world. Yeah. And the conclusions could be, well, maybe you shouldn't drop the bombs is never going to be one of the possible conclusions. Yeah, no. It's going to be maybe you could use more eco-friendly materials in building your bombs.
Yes.
Or
or get like LGBT people to build the bombs.
Yeah, exactly. Or recycled metal in bullet casings.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, but it's difficult, and even like the work we do, Declassified. Like, obviously it's a UK context, but it's the same thing. It's like what we say is basically unsayable in the mainstream media, and it's interesting, actually, like the preface that I've written for the book is all about how the US controls the UK, which we should probably talk about, because it is interesting, and it was something that I was not aware of in the same way. So, I mean, when I was starting out in journalism, like everyone knows that the US is the most powerful country in the world. It's intervened in various places, like Haiti and Bolivia, which are places I went to, and against weak states. And they have all these different elements like the CIA, US military, National Endowment for Democracy, US aid. Now, I always thought, okay, well, that's how the world works in the developing world, but in the UK, the US, it doesn't have that kind of footprint and isn't guiding our democracy or our political system in that way. But it's maybe even more powerful here than it is in those places I mentioned. For example, when I started looking at the US military presence in the UK, there's over 12,000 US troops permanently stationed in the UK across 11 RAF bases, so-called RAF bases. They're not run by the RAF, they're run by the US Air Force, but we have to call them RAF bases. Interestingly, you're not allowed to have any information about what happens on those bases. So the UK government, if you ask any questions, if an MP asks questions, if you send a Freedom of Information Act request, whatever, about anything that happens, they'll say, no, we can't comment on allies' activities in the UK. So you can get more information about the UK military here than you can about foreign militaries. They use the same excuse for Israel, for Israeli actions in the UK. Anyway, so you got that. Then you've got the interference in the political system, which they do through various ways. But one I looked at and talk about in the book is the British American Project, which was set up in the early 1980s at the time of Michael Foot's leadership of the Labour Party, who was the only other Labour leader post-Second World War who was not an Atlanticist after Jeremy Corbyn. So it was Jeremy Corbyn in 2015 to 2020 and Michael Foot in 1980 to 83. And similarly, like they freaked out about Corbyn, they were freaking out about Michael Foot, and they set up this organisation called the British American Project, which was about cultivating the left away from anti-imperialist or unilateralist positions. And it's hilarious. Like if you look at how they did it, they just basically created this membership organisation which still exists today. And Peter Mandelson's a prominent member of it, David Miliband, people like that.
Oh, outstanding, really, high integrity characters.
Brilliant people that, they many of the people associated with the British American Project were the biggest critics of Jeremy Corbyn, but obviously because he's got a long history of being against US wars. So they use that
unpatriotic of it.
Yeah, and again, it's identity politics stuff. So if you look at who they kind of sign up, they love to sign up like people from ethnic minorities, from diverse sexual backgrounds, that kind of thing. In fact, one of the people that was recruited to the British American Project was the poet Benjamin Zephaniah, who died recently. But he was previously on the board of Declassified, and I interviewed him about how it happened. It was really interesting, like how they recruited him. It was like at the Hay Festival, and they just sort of said to him, "Oh, we've got this really cool organisation that like helps poor kids in the US flourish and whatever it is." And he said he went to one of their meetings in the States, and he just realised straight away, this is not my bag. Like it was all corporate stuff. It's funded by the US Embassy and BAE Systems and Monsanto and all
well, they care about
They
care about you.
And he said he was duped. And then another Labour MP, former Labour MP called Emma Dent-Coad, who was former MP for Kensington. She lost her seat in 2019, but she said she was recruited. They tried to recruit her in the 80s, and it was someone at CND had tried to recruit her, and then she found out subsequently, or she was told, that this woman was working with the CIA.
No way.
So that's not like a conspiracy. That's Emma Dent-Coad's a serious person, but that's all in that's in the book. So there's the controller, and then there's like another part of the preface is about the National Endowment for Democracy, which is again a democracy promotion organisation, which was set up in the early 80s by President Reagan. And that was about like the CIA basically had huge amounts of scandals in the 70s, for their covert programs, and there was the church committee and stuff, which was to investigate. Yeah. And they were like, "Fuck!" Oh, sorry.
Oh no.
Okay, they were like, "Okay, we need to we need some new way of doing it. We need to not make, and maybe not doing it covertly. We just need to be out in the open." So the NED was specifically and consciously created as a kind of overt CIA. So we'll fund unions or peace freedom groups, but publicly. So, and then I found that they've been funding various different quote-unquote independent media organisations in the UK, and it picked up massively in 2015, like Bellingcat, Open Democracy, Article 19, Index, Index on Censorship, which is the CEO of Index on Censorship. Again, this is another example of how the US controls our political system. The CEO of Index on Censorship is Ruth Smee, who is now a Lord, actually, but was previously a Labour MP and was one of the major figures trying to bring down Jeremy Corbyn. She was revealed in one of the WikiLeaks cables as being a strictly protect informant for the US Embassy. So she's quoted in a cable saying, talking about Gordon Brown's election prospects or something along those lines, and it says, Ruth Smee strictly protect. Again, okay, you have a politician who's been exposed as an informant for a foreign power in the UK. You would think that might be a little bit of a scandal, but it's never been mentioned in any British newspaper, ever. Wow. So you just have this whole world. Can you imagine if it was like, I don't know, Chris Williamson had been exposed as like an informant for the Russian embassy? Like, it would be on the front page of every paper, you know? But because
could it be the next 20 years of Tory, election materials?
But it's assumed that we are the 51st state, so no one cares. Or at least it's unsayable in the mainstream media.
Hey, listeners, real quick. Do you ever find yourself sitting watching the stock market like this? Well, now you could instead be ordering my book like this. It's the story of GameStop. You can purchase it with a hoodie, with acknowledgements, or just with the early backers edition. It's all about the GameStop story. It's the real story, not just what you've seen on films. It's exactly what has happened over the last 3.5 years. And with DFE back, I'm finally able to draw a conclusion to my book. Please pre-order it. It really helps me out, and you will get it eventually, I promise. Hopefully this year.